we get to talk through one of your articles. So you've written a few articles on the website, and you guys can always go check those out and just look up Sean's name. But Sean, I would love to just talk about your article, Betrayed Spouses Prep for Disclosure of Affair, Porn, and Sex Addiction. This is a heavy title, just right off the bat. And I would just love if we could start by having you kind of explain who this article was written to.
Absolutely. So the purpose, the direction of this article is for couples in the very, very beginning of infidelity recovery. We have couples coming in, and we have a spouse who is the spouse who acted out, the spouse who stepped outside the marriage, and then we have the spouse who was betrayed, who was injured in this. And one of the first steps for couples going through this process, if they want to work on recovery in the marriage, is to lay a foundation of truthfulness. And so this idea of disclosure is a very intentional process where we walk through as a couple, laying the groundwork of here's what's happened. Here's the reality of what's going on, so that we can have that foundation to work from in the future. And so this article is written to help the injured spouse, the betrayed spouse, navigate that process, kind of prepare themselves to be ready for what they're about to do in this really important step in recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Is this mainly for your couples who you're working with, like in marriage counseling, or would you say this could apply to anyone who is working through this?
I think it could apply to anyone who's working through this. Although what I will say is it's really, really important for couples in the midst of this to make sure that they seek help from somebody who really has an expertise and a focus in walking couples through this particular issue. I don't find that it goes particularly well for couples if they just say, hey, we're just going to kind of do this on our own. Not because they're not intelligent or capable, not because they don't really want to work on their marriage, but simply because to use kind of a word picture, it would be like two people who are injured in hospital beds saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and take care of ourselves. We're going to heal ourselves. We're going to get up and do this whole thing while they're both very injured. And so just like that, if we're injured physically, we would need help when we're injured emotionally. Like this, trying to do this all on our own, sort through this, is not really the most helpful thing to do. And so I would encourage, couples, to have somebody on their team, on the recovery team, who's an experienced counselor, in particular with this issue. That's one of the things that I come across a lot with couples when I work with them, is maybe in the past that they've worked with somebody who kind of practices but doesn't have a focus in this area. And we're big believers here at MyCounselor.Online that none of us can be experts on every type of counseling. It's impossible to do that. And so what we try to do is really have areas of focus, and this happens to be mine. And so I would recommend to couples out there that you find somebody that this is their passion, this is their focus, this is where they really spend time learning and growing and trying to help people, because just somebody who generally maybe does counseling across a lot of issues may not have the depth of knowledge or focus in this area to be really helpful here.
Yeah, no, that's excellent advice. I think I noticed that a lot of times we tend to either kind of isolate ourselves in our hurt, or as, the injured person or whatnot, or just kind of let in like a friend or a mentor, someone, who is great to talk to and bounce thoughts off at times, but can't really speak into it with the wisdom and advice that someone like you could.
Absolutely. And we want to encourage people. It's not that the counselor is the end all be all in the situation. It's not that I operate and when I'm working with couples and say, hey guys, I'm what you need. It's more, I fill that counselor role. And definitely as you're speaking there, thinking for couples who work through recovery successfully, that they have a recovery team. They really have a number of people around them that support them and encourage them, including mentors and friends who are safe and supports. And so all those people are really, really important in this process.
Right. Yeah. No, just having that community around you kind of championing, your
Mm-hmm.
marriage and you guys, and so important. So my next question would kind of be, you talk extensively in the article about, the purpose of coming to talking about this,
Mm-hmm.
and the purpose of that conversation, which can be a really hard conversation. And one thing that you mentioned, kind of a quote that you give, is that it is relinquishing control of information.
Mm-hmm.
I guess more toward the spouse, that is struggling with the infidelity, that
Mm-hmm.
is the person who did that, or whatnot. And so, can you expand on this idea of what relinquishing control of information is?
Yeah, yeah. So infidelity of all kinds kind of has an anchor or a foundation in dishonesty. I really haven't found too many situations where infidelity can thrive without dishonesty, without covering things up.
Yeah.
And, covering things up is about having control of the truth. If I'm, betraying my spouse, what I'm doing is and they don't know what I'm doing is I'm saying, I'm going to know important parts of our reality, and I'm not going to let you in on that. I'm not going to let you be aware of what's going on here. I'm going to have control over that. And that's really, really how infidelity can kind of exist, how it can thrive and grow into something really destructive. And that is that we have that kind of deception. And so this idea of relinquishing control, of the truth is an active and a very intentional step in saying, I'm going to be fully honest and fully known by you. I'm not going to control how much of our reality you know anymore. I'm going to be, a good word for it would be, I'm going to be transparent with you. Oftentimes, betraying spouses or those who've had infidelity of any kind have a longing to be trusted again. They'll say, when will come a point where I can be trusted again by my spouse? When will be a point they'll lean into me? And I'll say, hey, one of the best things that you can do if you're going to ask for that from them is to allow them to have transparency, to trust them knowing the details of what's happened. You take the first step. You take the first step in allowing them to know the truth. You trust them with that truth, and you're going to be in a better position. They're going to be in a better position to actually trust you as a spouse again.
Yeah, like trusting you, kind of moving forward from that point, because
Mhm.
everything has been disclosed. You know what
Mhm.
happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you talk through 4 areas of
Mhm.
responsibility that the person who's disclosing the information should talk through. Can
Yeah,
you just talk through each of those reasons, those 4?
absolutely. So we break down disclosure into those 4 areas, kind of 4 focus areas
Hmm.
of here's what I need to provide to my betrayed spouse. Here's what I need to give them. And the very first thing that we talk about is I need to give an accounting of my actions. And this is pretty straightforward. I'm gonna tell you what I've done. I'm going to tell you what I've done. I'm going to tell you where I've lied to you, where I've been when I said I was other places. I'm gonna be open about my actions. I'm going to share those clearly with you. The second area is probably a little bit more difficult to open up about, and this is where I share things that I used as things that were my justifications and my thoughts around this. This is where things get a little bit ugly for the couple in recovery, because we're really dredging up some pretty toxic thinking in
Yeah.
that. And the purpose of that is not to say my toxic thinking was right. The purpose of that is to expose it. The purpose of that is to begin rooting out toxic thinking. And so we talk about sharing our motivations and our justifications, and to label them specifically that. To say, for example, if a betraying spouse shares, I was so angry with you, and I justified because I was angry with you, that I should be able to do this. I should be able to step outside the marriage. That's a really ugly thing to have to say. But as we're getting honest, it's an important thing to be able to own and expose that to the light, and to say, here's my thought process in this. Here's what was wrong in the road that I was going down as a person. Because the answer to me being angry is not, I get to go do this. The answer to that is many other things, like us working on our relationship and figuring out how to heal. And so this is, really personal. This is bringing out some of those ways that I have, justified and reasoned through
Yeah, that's so
what it is
correct.
I'm
You
doing.
think, you look at it and from the outside perspective, you think infidelity, or an affair or something, and you just see that. But when you get down to like the nitty gritty root of it,
Mm-hmm.
and those justifications, I mean, it's so much deeper, and the
Mm-hmm.
roots are so much deeper. And so there's so much more to work through than just, I had an affair.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we don't just stop at our actions, because, an injured spouse, betrayed spouse, instinctively deep down knows that that's true. They know that you didn't just step out of the marriage. Like, what were you thinking?
Right.
What was your thought process? What were your motivations? Not just, like you said, I had an affair and I shouldn't have, and I wish I didn't.
Right. Because it's like if you don't talk through the root of it, it's like you work on the affair and then
Mm-hmm.
there's still all of this underlying
Mm-hmm.
stuff that you didn't talk about that could, lead to worse or lead to more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of we'll share with people, it's behavioral interventions. If we leave it at just behavioral, doesn't work. And what we mean by behavioral in this kind of context is basically, here's how you acted, here's how you ought to be, kind of. And so if we just know and anchor in how we're supposed to be, that's going to fix everything. And I'm not against taking steps to live the way that we need to, but just staying, if we just do that part, we're going to miss an awful lot in what we need to uncover. A third area is emotionally, exposing that. What am I feeling? What are my feelings around this? For a lot of betraying spouses, they're kind of shocked to be asked this sometimes, because they think, especially if they're broken, about what they've done. Sometimes people come in and they feel very, very broken about having been unfaithful to their spouse, and they'll have so much shame that they'll say, what does it matter what I feel? That doesn't matter at all. We should only be talking about what my spouse feels. There's no room for me. I did this. I deserve what I get. It doesn't matter. And actually, believe it or not, for betrayed spouses, for your injured partner, it's actually incredibly helpful to them. It's incredibly important to them to know what you're feeling. One of the comments that is so common for a betrayed spouse is, things like, what did they feel? Did they feel this as much as I feel this?
Right.
Did they hurt the way that I hurt?
Right. Like I think of, wanting to know, do they feel remorse? Like, do they feel regret over this?
Mm-hmm. Are they in pain today? Because I woke up and I was hurting.
Yeah.
Or are they just over it? It was their day, fine. And what's sad about that, a lot of times, is out of that shame, the betraying spouse doesn't share. And so the message to their betrayed spouse is, I wasn't thinking about it today. I moved on today, which in so many cases is not true at all. And so it's actually really helpful for the betraying spouse to be able to be vulnerable in that way, and to be able to say, I'm so incredibly sad. I feel it right now, to be, or whatever it is, that they're open with what they're feeling in the struggle that this is. Because we're asking, the betrayed spouse to do the same thing, to be open with what they feel. And so, one-sided vulnerability doesn't feel very good. If they're the only one opening up about what they feel, that doesn't feel very good. So for betrayed spouse to have that connection there with their partner is so important. And then finally, another aspect, or the last aspect of this, is we encourage our spouses who stepped outside of the marriage to take time to share and identify and share the damage that they've caused via their actions. When people are in infidelity of all different kinds, it's important for their partners to understand that in so many cases, they may not necessarily be letting themselves think about the ramifications of what they're doing. And it isn't because, a lot of times people will misinterpret that and say, well, it's because they're so in love with this other person, or it's because they are so infatuated with porn, or whatever it is that they're being unfaithful with. And I'm not arguing that they may not have feelings for that other person. I'm not arguing that there's not pleasure in the sexual addiction behaviors that they're engaging in. But at its root, not letting ourselves identify what we're doing and the damage we're doing is really a form of denial. It's about protecting ourselves from the pain rather than enjoying the pleasure. And so it's really important, as a betraying spouse is hearing this, that they know that whether or not a spouse was thinking about what they were doing really has less to do with whether or not they care about you. It has more to do with them protecting themselves, protecting the fantasy of what they're doing. Because you can imagine, if you're out being unfaithful, if you really let yourself think about what it is you're doing, if you really think about the damage maybe that it's doing to your children or your wife or the people around you, what that's going to do is that's going to be just such a heavy weight, distracting you and pulling you out of the situation that you're trying to just enjoy and just step into. And so that's not something that people typically do. They just carry that and are thinking about that. What they do is they compartmentalize that and say, I'm not going to think about the damage that I'm doing. I'm not going to think about what this is causing in that. And so when we sit down, when a betrayed spouse gets to hear their partner own that and say, here's what I've done, here's the damage that I've caused, I own that. That's really important for both of them. That's important for that betrayed spouse to hear that and, okay, they're taking ownership and stepping out of denial. And for the betraying partner, it's really important because part of healing is being honest with ourselves. Part of healing is being honest with ourselves. So when we own the damage that we've caused, we're taking steps, initial steps to go out of denial and into being really honest.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. Are there any, boundaries that the betrayed or the betraying spouse, needs to respect, as far as, being transparent and bringing things into the light? What's too much to share and what's, not enough, and where's the balance?
Well, probably the first boundary that I find myself going over is understanding the nature of what I would come at from a theological vantage point. Some people watching this may not have kind of a biblical frame of reference. That may not be how they do life, but that's kind of my framework and understanding is that when we engage in a destructive behavior, Bible would call it sin, Matt. We don't flip a light switch and come out of that. We don't just, for instance, I'll hear somebody say, well, they just need to decide to be honest. And I'll say, you know what, they've really done damage to their capacity to be honest. Okay, and it's important you understand that they have done damage by engaging in this to their capacity to be honest. And so the very first boundary that I will recommend and I'll set with both spouses, I'll say, listen, To you as the betraying spouse, you've damaged your capacity to be honest, and I need to start helping you, and others need to start helping you regain that. You can't flip a light switch and be honest in the way that you need to be. You really need help. Okay? For the betrayed spouse, what I want to highlight to them is say, listen, you could push for and say, I want you to tell me everything right now. But the reality is your partner is going to need to be very intentional and get help opening up, taking some time to prepare this disclosure. And so what I need you to do right now is I need you to wait. I know that's such a hard thing to ask for, but I need you to wait for them to prepare this. I need you to give them time. Don't be pressing right now. Don't be pushing right now, at least in the immediate time frame. They need to be working on this, okay? And usually we don't like to have full disclosure happen we want to have it happen within the first 30 days. Doesn't always take the first 30 days, but we've got to regain our capacity to be honest with ourselves. And probably the second important boundary, and you're kind of alluding to that, is like, well, how much information to put out there. We have a rule of thumb here that we want to know what is helpful to us to be able to heal, to understand the reality of what's happened. But I don't want to know a level of detail that's going to be creating graphic and traumatic mental imagery for myself. That's really important for people to hear. It's one thing to know, for example, I'll give an example, when I talk with people, to have your betrayed spouse come to you and say, on such and such week, I coordinated with my affair partner. We decided to meet up at a hotel that week. I lied to my boss on Tuesday of that week and told him I was running errands or on a sales call, and I met my infidelity partner at this particular hotel in town. I paid for the room. We met. We had unprotected sex. I was there about an hour, and then I left and came home to you that evening. Now that's a painful thing to hear, but that's also a level of detail that is clear, saying here's exactly what I did. Here's exactly what I did. Here's how we did that. It's unhelpful. It's destructive if I come at it from a very vague perspective, because I'm still evading and denying. If I explain that same story and I said, well, at some points, my affair partner and I did meet up for sex. I really regret that. I shouldn't have done that. And, I'm really changing. I'm so sorry. Okay. There's almost nothing to grab onto there and actually know what happened. Right. So that's one ditch that we can end up in. The other ditch would be getting graphic with, for instance, sexually, here's what we did. When we met up, here's what we were wearing. Here's things that we were acting out, or whatever it is. Now that betrayed spouse is going to have pictures, vivid pictures in their mind that are not necessarily helping them heal. They certainly know more, but it's not helping them heal. And so all that to say, one of the boundaries that I'll share with betrayed spouses, injured spouses, is don't confuse knowing more information with healing. Sometimes people get locked into that. They almost get locked into the relief that knowing some new piece of information brings them, and they confuse that with healing. And what happens is they almost, in a way, almost begin acting like an addict themselves when it comes to the truth. Tell me a little bit more. I've thought about this other little tidbit, and if you would just tell me. And they press for that. They press for it. Give me this information. Give me that. Give me this. Give me that. And as their spouse gives them that, they get just a temporary okay, I know. And then shortly after that, in their distress, they need another fix. They need another hit. So a second boundary that I'll share with betrayed spouses is, hey, don't confuse knowing information with healing. Don't confuse, like, if you could just know more, you could heal more. If you could know more, you would trust more. Because if you're caught in that cycle, we need to identify that ultimately is going to be a destructive cycle for you. That ultimately is about you trying to cope with what it is you're feeling and maybe being overwhelmed in that, not knowing how to do that. And you're doing this thing where maybe just asking a question kind of makes that feel better for just a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so those would be, two boundaries when it comes to information. We want to be clear. We want to provide a real honest picture of what's going on, but we don't want to be graphic. We want to give some time to really root out the truth, because we're recognizing that part of the injury of infidelity is diminishing our capacity to be honest with ourselves and our spouse.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Great advice. Just sharing only what's helpful. And I just love I love that quote of don't confuse more information with healing. And I think, that can apply to a lot of areas. But yeah, especially this. So is 100% healing even possible, after something like this?
Absolutely. And to use that phrase, I'd say, yes, absolutely. It's possible. It's doable. And maybe to reframe that for people, healing from any major life event, whether it be infidelity or loss of a loved one, any number of things that we go through, in life, because there's pain in life. Our goal is not to recreate the past. Healing is not going back to a time when this didn't happen, because that's not reality. Nobody's ever at peace chasing what used to be. And so when it comes to all forms of healing and loss, it really is about taking what we've been through and creating something new. It's about creating a marriage that is awesome, that is strong, that is healing from something that is now a part of our story. We're not denying it. We're not going back to a time when we pretend this didn't happen. And with that being said, I want to be clear, as we grieve well and move forward, you can expect that you and your spouse are not thinking about this all the time, that it's not central in your life the way that it is today. I think that really is what people are afraid of. They are in the initial throes of this infidelity coming out, and they're like, oh my gosh, am I ever not going to feel the way that I feel today? Am I ever not going to focus on this the way that I focus on it today? And I say, absolutely, that's totally possible. In fact, couples in recovery who work recovery well will tell you, once they're past healing, that they're not thinking about the infidelity every day. They're not in that place. And on the other side of this, they built a marriage in so many cases that is better than, that is stronger than, that is more secure than the one they had prior to the infidelity. And with that being said, I don't mean that in the way that we're ever glad that the infidelity happens. I always want to be clear with people, if I were to have you talk with couples who are so glad for where they're at today, they're not turning around and saying, boy, we're just glad that the infidelity happened. But what they did do is they accepted their reality. They grieved it. They worked through that recovery process, and now they're in a place of having a really, really awesome marriage, really awesome relationship. And they moved to a place where they are not raw, with what it is that happened, but they've really moved on.
Yeah. I hope that people watching right now, if you're in this place, just feel hope. Hope for that healing, and hope of grieving well, and then moving forward with your spouse. And Sean, I would just love if you could maybe just end with a word of encouragement for the readers of this article who are preparing for that really hard conversation.
Absolutely. I would just want to say first that my heart goes out to you. I feel so much compassion towards you, being in a situation that you didn't cause. You didn't ask to be in this. And so I just want to first express, that. And I want to share with you that healing is not only possible, it's likely, it's going to happen if you'll do the things in recovery that need to be done. It's not a, are you strong enough to heal? It's not a matter of, do you have what it takes? It's a matter of, are you just willing to do what you need to do? Are you willing to take these steps? And if you are, with help, not looking for you to do that on your own, but with help, you can absolutely heal. And I have yet, honestly, to see the situation, because sometimes people respond and will say, well, you don't know my situation. You don't know what it is that I have been through, what I've had to deal with. And I'll just say, I have yet to find the situation, the marriage, that cannot heal in a spectacular way if both people are really actively a part and engaged in this recovery process, which is really amazing to me. It says something about our capacity, with God's help, to heal. Is just, the circumstance is less important than what we're willing to do today. And so just want to encourage those people with that be encouraged. This healing works, recovery works, which is what makes me so thankful for what I get to do day in and day out.